When you give other people feedback, you have to be very careful that the feedback you're giving them is intended for them and that it's not intended for yourself. If you become astute at recognizing that occasionally you'll want to give other people feedback that you really intend to give yourself, this can be a great opportunity to build yourself up in the process. What do I mean by this? Well, sometimes when we tell somebody something that we've observed about their behavior, we're really observing something about our own behavior. And we're finding them doing the same things we may tend to do, and so we're trying to warn them not to do the things that we're worried about doing. If we want to understand how this happens, we have to first start with an understanding of the source of feedback. Feedback comes from our ability to recognize patterns in what we do, and to infer things about patterns or cues that we think are leading to a pattern that are then indicators of something that may be a problem. For example, just today I was walking out of the bedroom and I noticed my husband had a page up. He was looking at a website and I saw the word Adele on the page. I also know recently Adele released a new album, so immediately in my mind I thought, I wonder if there's a concert coming up or some event here in New York City, and I wonder if he's looking to get tickets or looking for an opportunity to go see Adele. And so I asked him if he was getting tickets to some event that was coming up, and he said he was getting tickets. So I patted myself on the back because I had jumped to a conclusion and it turned out to be correct. Funny as it seems, our brain turns out to be a marvelous engine to detect a pattern. A week ago, I saw the song for the first time that's a part of her new album. I became aware of it. I talked with my husband at the time, so I know he was aware of it. I saw the word Adele flash up on his screen. And I saw a form, and by stitching all that together, subconsciously, I immediately came to the conclusion, perhaps there's an event going on. And the conclusions we come to, well, it's just as easy to be wrong. In fact, it's probably easier to be wrong than it is to be right. How does this relate to feedback? Well, when we're giving other people feedback, we're looking for things that stand out to us. So it's very possible when we're giving other people feedback, we're looking for things that might stand out when we evaluate our own work. So we may begin to evaluate them the same way we evaluate ourselves. For example, if I know that I'm the type of person that lately, perhaps I've been a little bit too aggressive in conversations with other people, if I know I've been aggressive and I'd like to tame that back a bit, I'll watch my own behavior and find cues that are indicating to me that I'm being aggressive so I can scale back and not be so aggressive. As you can imagine, my mind is primed to detect cues that indicate aggression. So if somebody comes up to me after a meeting and asks me to judge or give some feedback to them about how they composed themselves in that meeting, if they had been assertive, for example, in making a decision or presenting an alternative in making an important decision, if they have been assertive, I might notice the cues for assertiveness are very similar to the cues for aggression, and I may just jump to the conclusion automatically in my mind that they were being aggressive in the meeting. Much like I jumped to the conclusion that Adele has a concert coming up because I saw a form on a web page. If I don't consider other factors of the meeting, I may tell that person they were being a bit too aggressive, when in fact they were being assertive for a good reason. Perhaps they needed to be assertive to get across that their alternative was a better decision for the company to be making. If I told them they were aggressive, well, in a future meeting when an important decision is being made, they may not want to be assertive because they think it's being aggressive, and then they won't present their side of the argument or their alternative with as much fervor that's necessary to try and convince people to consider their alternative, and a suboptimal decision could be made then. So when a situation like that arises, where I'm evaluating the activity or behavior of somebody else that's very similar to activities and behaviors that I'm evaluating in myself, I hope that I catch those situations where I'm projecting onto them an evaluation that I really just want to make about myself and not about them. I hope I can catch that and not give them that feedback because it may lead them astray. Now, maybe that feedback would be beneficial for them to have if they truly were being aggressive. But if they're simply being assertive, I'd hope to catch that. Now, one way I can go about catching that is to consider other factors in the meeting and realize an important decision was at play, and then understand that the assertiveness was just to make sure that people heard what they had to say. However, if for some reason I couldn't find a reason to tell them that they were being aggressive because I figured out that they were only being assertive, I still can reap the benefits of this observation because I can reflect upon the fact that I'd like to be less aggressive myself. I can be proud that I detected a cue whereby somebody was perhaps being aggressive, but I can also be proud that I took the time to understand other factors that indicated that they weren't being aggressive, which might help me understand other factors to discern when I'm being aggressive versus when I'm being assertive. So I can use this as an opportunity to give myself feedback, even though the feedback I'm giving isn't about my own performance. The best way to avoid giving this type of feedback is just to be mindful of situations where it's very likely you could give this type of feedback. So if you're evaluating somebody else's behavior or performance in a situation or activity that you routinely partake in yourself, then you should be careful to make sure you're not giving them feedback that's intended for yourself. For example, I create online courses, and I also review other people's courses that they create. And I try and give them helpful feedback to help build them up in the courses they're creating. But what I have to be very careful of is to not give them feedback about how they create their courses that really just relates to the improvements that I'm trying to make in my own courses. For example, I notice in my narration, at least lately, I've used the word actually a lot. It's almost my word. It's something I turn to when I'm stuck or I don't know what to say next, or it just happens to be filler words. So I've worked very carefully to try and become aware when I use the word actually too much in a recording so that I can scale it back, so that I can take a pause and take a deep breath and figure out what it is I want to say. However, because I'm aware of this in myself, my mind is primed to see this in other people. So when I'm reviewing courses that other people have created, I've noticed a few times when people use the word actually. Perhaps they use it a couple of times. I've even jumped to the conclusion that people have been using the word actually too much. And then upon thinking about it for 2 or 3 seconds, I realized that that's the first occurrence of them using the word actually I've even noticed inside of that course I was reviewing. So it was ridiculous for me to put down feedback, which I was about ready to put down for them, that they use the word actually too much and they should avoid it. Fortunately, I scaled back and recognized that's just feedback I'd like to give myself, and I didn't give it to them. And conversely, the flip side of the feedback equation, if you're asking for feedback, perhaps it would be best to seek somebody out who's not an expert in your industry, who doesn't routinely perform that behavior or activity, and look for people that then wouldn't have the biases to give you feedback that they really mean to give themselves.